Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Y'all ready for this?
All right, average Jocks fans, this week we welcome former NHLer Ian White to the show. Ian, welcome.
Thank you.
Honestly, like I say almost every week, we are humbled that, we have so many players that come on, and it's like you're answering like this strange guy in his mid-20s sending you a DM of, do you want to come on my podcast that most people have never heard of. So I really do appreciate your time, and I look forward to learning a bit more about you. I mean, I've had the pleasure of watching you in your playing career throughout the NHL, and now we get to learn about the humble retirement life of Ian White.
Sounds good. Happy to be here.
So we'd like to start by talking about your career and kind of how you got your start. So you played with Swift Current in the WHL. I mean, being from, Ontario myself, did not get a lot of exposure to the WHL. We see a lot of the O, some of the Q. So what was it like? I mean, I'm sure you had buddies that played in the OHL or the Q, or even in the States. Like, what would you say would be the difference for, I guess, those that are in the east part of Canada? Like, what is the WHL kind of like compared to the O in terms, like, I know we see like the Eastern Conference in the NHL typically a little less physical than the West. Is it similar when it comes to junior hockey?
Yeah, I would think to some degree it's probably similar to just the demographics of Canada in general. You got Western Canada is more kind of country and farming type of folks, and on the East Coast you've got that type, and the Quebec and stuff, and Ontario, everyone's kind of different. So I think the Western Hockey League is, I was fortunate enough to play there 4 years in Swift Current. It was probably the four most favorite years of my life, actually. It was so much fun. I grew up in a small town, Steinbach, Manitoba, had about 10,000 people when I was a youngster there. And then going to Swift Current, it was, at that time when I played there, I think there was only about 16,000 people, which is, it's by far the smallest team in the city in the Canadian Hockey League.
Uh-huh.
And it's amazing that they have a team, because it's just such a small population. But it's in the middle of Saskatchewan, like right in the middle. There's no big cities close by. Regina's the closest city of any size. It's about 2.5 hours. So you're literally in this small town right in the middle of the prairies, and it was a lot of fun. And the comparisons, yeah. I'm living in Ontario now, and you drive down the 401, and there's teams all over the place, right? So everyone's really close. In the West, we go from, at that time, you had a team in Brandon, so that's like kind of the center of Canada, and you'd be taking buses all the way to Vancouver and Washington. Prince George is very far too. So you spend a lot of time on the bus, you spend a lot of time hanging out with your buddies, and you get real tight.
So I guess like you said, you compared the the trip down the 401. You're hitting the Hamilton, Ottawa, Kingston, and so on. Like, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, the trip or the trek even from one side of Ontario to the other is long. I couldn't imagine doing Swift Current to Vancouver. Like, what I mean, I've never traveled that myself. I'd love to go out west, but what like, what are we talking on a bus? Like, how long is that roughly?
Swift Current to Vancouver, it's it's probably, I would say, like 20 hours. But
Wow.
people forget. A lot of Ontarians, I find, they don't understand how big Ontario is either. I spent most of my off seasons in Kenora, which is as far west in Ontario as you can go. And then when I come to drive to camp here with the Leafs, it's a solid 22-hour drive, and you're still in the same province. So Ontario is massive too. It's just people are all kind of bunched in here close to Toronto, in between Toronto and Ontario.
Yeah, I actually have a couple buddies up in Kenora, and whenever we're about an hour from Ottawa, and they just will do the trek down a couple times a year, and I'm just like, you guys are nuts just to come down for like a weekend to
Wow.
catch up with the boys. I'm like, you guys are pretty dedicated. But I mean, you must have some great stories of times, like whether you said it's on the bus or traveling with the boys. Like what? So I mean, like your WHL, you're looking what, like 15, 16 till about 20?
Yeah, I did 16 to 19, but yeah, you can go one more year until 20.
So I mean, at that time, and I mean, we're talking early 2000s here. There's no cell phones. You're not scrolling Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever to pass the time. I'm assuming there's lots of cards and a decent amount of napping. But like, what else were you guys doing to kill 20 hours in between? Uh, you know, like that just seems like an excessive amount of time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, fortunately, we would only go uh the BC, so they broke it down. There was a US trip because there's a team in Spokane,
Yeah.
Portland in Oregon, and Tri-Cities. I think that's in Washington.
Yeah. And
But
then
there's
was there Washington at the time, or Seattle? Sorry, the Thunderbirds. Were they?
Seattle. Yes,
Yeah.
that's the one I'm thinking of. There's four teams when I played. So we do the US trip as one trip, and then we do a BC trip where you go all the way up to Prince George, play Vancouver, Kamloops, Kelowna. There might be one more team, but and actually we only did those trips, so it was every other year. So you do
Okay.
BC one year, then you do the US another year, and then the same for those teams. They'd come to us one year, and then one year we'd come to them. So in my career, I actually only went to those places two times. So, but they were long trips. I think we would leave. Usually, you'd leave like late in the evening, so you just basically play some cards, and then you'd sleep, and you wake up, and you get there, kind of thing.
So was Swift Current at least forking out with a nice coach bus where there's maybe a bathroom at the back, or is this like speak now, forever hold your pee till the next stop or next time we need gas?
Yeah, well, we definitely had a bathroom. I would guarantee that every bus that any CHL team takes has a bathroom on it. Yeah.
Yeah, any traveling sport I did where we got on a bus, we were on the yellow school buses, and it was we're stopping here for gas, get off, everybody that needs to go to the bathroom, get back on. We're driving until the next time we need gas.
Yeah.
So I'm glad your experience with road trips on buses is a little better. That being said, I mean those are long bus trips to make, even once every 2 years. Did you have like a go-to snack for the bus?
You know what? That's something I can't even remember. I'm sure we stopped if the trips were long enough. We would stop at a gas station somewhere, grab some snacks. But most of the time, you just hammer right down. I don't know if I packed stuff ahead of time, probably some meat sticks and maybe some chips or candy bar. But yeah,
So present day, if I said, Ian, we're going on a road trip from Swift Current to Vancouver, what would you bring today as your snack?
from here to Vancouver.
Well, no. Like if we
Oh,
did that same Swift Current to Vancouver trip, what would you be grabbing as a snack? We're stopping at 7-Eleven or Quickie or
Yeah. Probably just meat sticks and maybe a tub of Pringles, tin of Pringles.
that is actually my fiance's go-to. Every time I stop for gas, we have a gas station maybe 35 seconds from our home. And on the way home from somewhere, we'll stop and to gas up and get me a meat stick while you're in there. And I always come out and I'm like, there's so many different kinds now. You have the Jack Links, the Great Canadian, and then within those multiple brands, you have the mild, the spicy, the jalapeno, the cheddar. There's just, I don't even know what to do, so I just pick like a handful of them and hope that it's something she likes. And then we have a amount of meat sticks sitting in our pantry for a while, but Pringles definitely close to her heart as well. I'm more of a what is that, like the Humpty Dumpty, like onion rings things.
Okay.
That's my go-to car snack. Kind
Nice.
kind of smelly at times. It's a sour cream and onion, but moving on from kind of your WHL days, you moved up to the AHL after you were drafted from Toronto, and you played for the St. John's Maple Leafs. So you went from playing out west to going out east now. What was the experience going from one end of the country to the other? And I guess making that, like, going from Swift Current right to the AHL.
Yeah, it was quite a change. So I was the first in junior year living with a billet family. This was the first time I'd be living on my own. I ended up staying with one of my best friends on Swift Current. He got drafted by Toronto too, so we ended up living together. And Newfoundland it's very far out there. I was amazed actually how far away it was.
Okay, I didn't know if we were talking about the people being far out there. I know a few people from Newfoundland, and that sentiment could have also been used to describe some of the Newfies that I know.
Yeah, it's definitely a different culture. They've got great people there. The people were so friendly. Um, it was a very very fun experience, and so basically you're moving away and living on your own for the first time, and doing all your own cooking and all that stuff. Not having a billet mom prepare all that for you, but it was quite an experience. There's no NHL that year. That year there was a lockout, so there's
Yeah.
no NHL. So we had a bunch of older guys that played with us who probably would have been playing in the NHL, and it was just it was it was so much fun. That was one of the most fun years of my career too. I guess maybe they all are, but it was awesome. Really fun time there.
So you mentioned, the billet mom, taking care of the meals, and then jumping from that right to being, living with your buddy on your own in St. John's. Like, if you had a couple boys from the team over, like, what was Ian White cooking up for dinner? Like, what was your go-to or your chef's kiss meal that you would be preparing in the AHL on your own?
I didn't once actually cook for anybody else. We didn't. Our household was quite a gong show. Um, yeah, the only thing that I remember cooking is that I just and it was winter there, and they got pretty crazy winters too, so can't go outside and barbecue. The only thing I remember cooking regularly is T-bone steaks in a fry pan.
Okay, that sounds definitely like a couple college meals that I've had to whip up on a hot plate. Uh, but that's awesome. I mean, yeah, their winters are a little extreme, that's for sure. Um, you mentioned like having like your first, I guess, year turning pro being a lockout season. Was that, I guess, kind of strange or a weird adjustment? Like, it's a big adjustment, turning pro to begin with. Did you feel any added stress, or was it almost an easier transition because you had vets that, like you said, would otherwise be in the NHL playing in the A, and that, like, the transition or the learning process, like, did that make it easier, or was it more stressful knowing that you may not get as much playing time because there are guys down from the league?
Yeah, I never really thought about it that much. It was I would think a pretty low stress year actually for everybody. Just there was no chance of anybody getting called up. So it was
That's
just
fair.
kind of a happy-go-lucky season, and not that nothing mattered, but it just the vibe around there was yeah, it was just it was very low stress.
And I mean, I just pulled up the roster from your first year there. I mean, like you said, there's quite a few guys that you actually ended up playing with, um, in Toronto. Michael Telquist. Oh wow, Trevor Kidd played one game. Uh, I'm assuming your friend you were talking about from Swift Current was Jeremy Williams.
Yeah.
And then Carlo Koliakovo, Mike Brown, Jay Harrison, Chris Newbury, Kyle Wellwood. I mean, there was quite a few guys that you ended up playing with in Toronto. So that's, I mean, very cool that your first year pro and you ended up playing. Like, I can't think of that many guys that make a jump and they all come up with that same team. Um, I feel like that's almost rare nowadays. Um, whether it's trade signings, going to play in Europe, but would you say that there was a different style of play from what you were used to coming from the WHL to going to the AHL? Like, was it a tough jump going from, like, even like you said, like, you only played till you were 19, like you didn't do that extra fourth year?
Yeah, I mean every stage of hockey when you move up, it's going to be a big difference. I never really contemplated at the time. You're just playing. You're not really comparing things and like, is this game faster? Is it stronger? Are guys bigger? It's everything, right? Guys are older. Guys are professionals. The hockey's obviously totally different in quality. That at that time, that was the best hockey in the world. There was no NHL, so the skill level and the determination, um, you know, aside from what I said, things didn't seem to matter. At the same time, everything seems to matter because it's professional. Now your entire job and your life is on the line. So it was going from playing junior to professional hockey. Yeah, it was I wouldn't say it's a big transition because it's just something you do. They call you, you show up to camp, and you start playing again. So you're not really evaluating things too much. But it was fun because it was, we had so many, and it wasn't just our team with all these NHL guys. Every other
Yeah.
team was stacked too. So the quality of the AHL that year probably is unrivaled just because it had a full season of
Yeah.
NHL guys on every single team.
Which is really cool, especially because a lot of the AHL markets aren't necessarily these, like, they're obviously hockey markets, but it's not, these big cities. And I feel like there's almost something more intimate filling like a smaller arena. And I'm sure, most arenas were packed every night with like you said, just the NHL talent, and that league has probably never been better or seen that much talent at once. So it must have been pretty cool to walk into these barns and like your first dose is like packed and there is some NHL guys playing in the A. Like, it must have been pretty cool. And I mean, you spent 2 years in St. John's before the team moved to Toronto. So I mean, another adjustment there. So now you've went east, west, and now you're in Ontario. Was there a big difference between, I guess, the team in St. John's to the team when they moved to Toronto?
So I actually only went there for one season. Like, so the season that I was there, and that was the other thing too. The team was moving to Toronto the next year, so there wasn't even going to be a team in St. John's anymore. So we were kind of the last rodeo in that city for those for the fans and for everything there. But yeah, then So St. John's moved to Toronto, became the Marlies, and so that next season now the NHL's back on. Um, moved to Toronto before camp, and it was very exciting. Toronto is obviously the biggest city in Canada, and now you're in Leaf country with the Leafs back on. So there was a lot of buzz, a lot of hype, and it's basically just a whirlwind, right? You just show up at camp and you get your schedule and things just start flying. So I didn't make the Leafs out of camp, obviously, and ended up playing most of the entire season with the Marlies until the last 12 games of the year is when I got called up and then got to stay with the Leafs for the rest of it.
So right before we move on to the Leafs, the last question, just because I don't think we've had anybody that's played for the Marlies and the Leafs on the show. Like, being that the AHL team and the NHL team are in the same city, was there a lot of intermingling more so than, like, again, I trying to think back of affiliates back in the day, but like Montreal and Hamilton, like the teams are separate. You probably not a lot of, like, I guess, communication back and forth between the players of those two teams, but it being the same city, like, was there a lot of you guys seeing the guys that are playing in the NHL, or them seeing you, or practices, or seeing the coaching staff from the NHL at all? Like, was there any intermingling?
Not much. No, we played at the Rico Coliseum, and we also practiced there. So the Leafs at that time, they were practicing at the rink in Lakeshore, which they built a new one since. But so we were never really even in the same building, so we didn't commingle much at all.
That surprises me. Like, you would think just to adapt the younger guys, there would be a little more, taking advantage of the close proximity of, you know, the farm team in the big league. So that surprised me. That I if I was a betting man, I would have probably said there would have been some, you know, maybe prep work, or, tips or something that they would, prep you guys for.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, and it was the first year that the Marlies were here too, so they're probably just feeling
That's
things
true.
out and trying to get a new organization up and running. So who knows? Maybe there's lots more of that now. I know they share. I'm pretty sure they share practice rinks now. So then you'd be around them all the time, right?
I mean, and that definitely makes more sense to me. But 100%, you're right with the fact they're probably bigger fish to fry, moving an entire AHL team from one province to another, and getting them up and going. But it's pretty cool though. Like, your last year, um, or your year with the Marlies in Toronto, you had Paul Maurice as head coach, which, I mean, you were lucky enough to have him, I believe, your second year with the Leafs. So I'm gonna, like, almost sandwich that question and then come to one in the middle after. But, like, is it cool now watching, like, you got Paul Maurice in his kind of NHL debut and seeing, like, to me, at least in my opinion, and, I'm 28, so I have limited, NHL history in terms of all those great legendary coaches. But Paul Maurice sticks out to me as a very successful coach that I could see landing up in the Hockey Hall of Fame one day. Is it cool, or fun to watch, or nostalgic to watch him still coaching and having success, like just going to the Stanley Cup Finals with Florida?
Yeah, I'm really happy for him. He was one of my favorite coaches in the NHL. He was just a really solid guy. Like you said, I had him with the Marlies, so he came. That was I don't know if that was his first AHL gig, probably not, but he
I
was
mean,
super
with
young.
the Marlies, it is, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if
Because I'm pretty sure he coached that 1 year in the Marlies, and then they got new management for the Leafs, and Pat
You know,
Quinn was no longer coaching, so they pulled him in, and so yeah, that was his first season. I think he was 38 at the time.
yeah, I was gonna say, you know what? Um it was not even it that is his only year coaching the AHL.
Yeah,
But he was assistant coach in Hartford, head coach for Hartford for 2 years, and then head coach in Carolina from 97 to 2004.
yeah, he's been. Does it say how many games he's coached?
Um, that is a great question. I mean, on Hockey DB, there is no total,
Okay.
but I mean, it only shows his year by year what his record is. I'll have to look that up, but I mean, impressive his longevity. I feel like not many people have gotten like in everywhere he's been, it's tenured. It's not like these 1 or 2 off seasons. Like he's there for a chunk of time, which obviously shows success in what he's able to bring to a team.
Yeah, he's definitely a well liked guy. Um, I know in Toronto for the Leafs he only lasted 2 seasons, but
Mm-hmm.
we had a lot of older guys, um, and they were used to Pat Quinn, and he had been around there for quite a while. And so Toronto, this was it was in the midst of a rebuild that they probably needed to happen, but yet obviously they never actually want to do that. So we had a bunch of these older legendary type players, and then they're trying to bring in some new guys, some young guys, and get them in too. And we were always right on the cusp of making playoffs, but we weren't like a contender,
Mm-hmm.
and we weren't quite, way out of it where you're just going to tear everything down and rebuild. So there was a lot of turmoil. The whole 4 years that I played there, there's lots of trades going through different management and coaches and stuff. So, but yeah, it's good to see that he's still going. He's going to have well, he already has longevity, but he'll be coaching for as long as he wants.
Yeah, and I guess this brought up to, like I said, the question where I kind of jumped forward and then coming back. I mean, I know you had Pat Quinn for a limited number of games, the 12 that you mentioned, before Paul Maurice took over. But what what was the difference? Like, I mean, I always looked at Pat Quinn as a kid on TV whenever, you're on Coach's Corner or whatever. And my fondest Pat Quinn memory was he got the puck in the eye, and then like 2 weeks later, while he still has a shiner, he got another puck in the eye, and he just rocked like two black eyes, and he just looked like the toughest son of a bitch out there. At I don't know how old he was, but uh, he just looked like, you know, almost reminded me of maybe a little bit of a happier Babcock, where he was just like a tough, no nonsense guy. And you're, I guess, limited, uh, you know, interactions with Pat over those 12 games. What was the difference between like a Pat Quinn and a Paul Maurice? Just coaching
Well,
styles, I guess. I mean,
Pat, Pat was also actually, well, even though it was only a short while, he was one of my favorite coaches too. It was actually hilarious. Um, the first day that I got there, I got called up to New Jersey, and we're doing morning skate, and we're just doing the first drill is just 3 line shooting, and you skate straight down the ice and shoot. And I was going about 70%, and I was flying by guys. Like guys are just out there kind of fooling around and going not even half speed. And the older guys were like, "Hey man, you gotta cool out." And so obviously I did. And he would run then when we get into regular practice, that was on the road. Once we got back home, and the first regular practice with him, he skates out on the ice. He has these old, I don't know the brand, but they look like old Daus skates. And he skates to the center ice, and he has a whiteboard. He draws up a play or a drill, and looks at his clock, checks time, blows the whistle to start the drill, and we go do the drill. And it doesn't matter whether guys were doing the drill wrong or guys were doing whatever they wanted to do. He would wait till if he wanted to do the drill for 5 minutes, he'd be watching his clock, and as soon as 5 minutes hit, doesn't matter what part of the drill, he'd blow the whistle, and that was the end of the drill. So I just found it funny, and it was like I actually really appreciated it, and that's to me part of being a professional is being able to show up and work hard when it counts. And if you don't need to practice hard, or if you don't need to be working out in the gym, as long as you show up and perform, that's all that matters. And so it was. I know they kind of the media and the people would say that it was a country club atmosphere there, but I appreciated that, especially as I moved on in my career, and you were in some situations with some coaches where it was the opposite of a country club. It was so he was quite a bit different, and actually than any other coach nowadays. You won't see any of that probably ever again. Paul Maurice, he came in, so now that I'm older, I look back at things a little bit differently than obviously when I was 22 and being a rookie for the Leafs and playing for them. But he was I'm pretty sure he was 38 years old, and so you've got guys like Matt Sundin and some of these older guys, like actual legends of the game, and here's this young coach coming in,
Yeah.
replacing another legend, Pat Quinn. And I could see how it'd be a very interesting dynamic on what style of coach are you going to be? Are you going to be super hard? Are you going to try to teach guys stuff, or are you going to try to be buddy like a player's coach? I could see how it'd be very interesting to come into that situation. But he came in, so I guess this was his first head coaching gig.
Well, in Toronto, because he did
in
head
Toronto,
coach in Hartford and in Carolina for many years.
He was in Carolina before he was in Toronto.
Yeah, so he did Hartford, and then they moved to Carolina, Toronto, Carolina.
Oh wow! So
And
he
then
started
from
coaching
Carolina, he went to
real young.
Winnipeg. If you see his hockey DB picture, it does not look like him. Like,
Yeah,
we're
wow.
talking full head of hair, comb over. Like, this picture was probably taken when he was in his mid-20s. But it looks like he made the jump from the OHL right to the NHL, which is impressive. And obviously to stay there as long as he has, I mean, if he was 38 when you were a rookie, I mean, he's probably in his 60s now.
Well, and he's a well-liked guy among the players. I know that. I know the players respect him, and I could see why ownership and management like him behind the bench too. So it's he was a solid guy, still is.
I mean, like you said, he lasted 2 years in Toronto, and then your last 2 years in Toronto, I would say, at least on the outside, and again, hockey fan and me being a kid, like you mentioned, you go from a legend, Pat Quinn, somebody that I thought was a young up-and-coming coach in Paul Maurice. And then Ron Wilson comes in, and that guy looked like pretty much anybody who's ever been president of the United States, where they go in and at the end of their term, it looks like they've aged by like 25 to 30 years. Ron looked disheveled by the end of his 2 years in Toronto. Like, he just seemed like he was in shambles from day one. Like, he did not like the media. The media didn't seem to like him. And there was just seemed to be issues from day one. Was it as dysfunctional with him as it made it seem in the media, at least?
I don't know if dysfunction would be the correct term, but personally, my experience with Ron Wilson. So I played 2 full seasons, and then he came in, and I had 2 good years, a decent rookie year, and then a good sophomore year. And coming into camp when he took over, he didn't have me in the lineup. And then home opener came and went, and I wasn't in the lineup. And so then game 2, he sits me out, game 3, and I'm kind of sitting there like, what's going on here? And then I said, oh, game 4, game 5, game 6. And now I start thinking like, man, I'm going to have to get out of here. Otherwise this guy's going to bury me. And he sat me out the first 11 games. And we just happened to be down in Carolina playing. And one thing that I know the players definitely didn't like about him was he would make a lot of the scratches take warm-ups just cause. And then even if they had no chance of playing, I know usually one guy will skate out there just in case a guy's hurt that might have to play. But he would have 3 or 4 guys scratches out there taking warm-ups just to get undressed after. And I
Is that
hadn't
like a
been.
slap in the face? Like, is that kind of like rubbing salt in a wound?
Yeah, it's
Like, I've never played any near pro hockey, but that kind of seems insulting as
what
somebody
is. Yeah,
listening to
yeah,
that.
it's yeah. And it's a straight power move, I think. At least that's how it's perceived. But so anyway, we're in Carolina. He has me take warm-ups, and I actually hadn't been taking warm-ups this whole time. So I go out there and I get off the ice quick to get undressed so the guys can, get ready for the game. And I got half my gear off, and Dale Hunter comes in and comes up to me and says, "Hey, you're gonna play on the wing tonight." And I looked at him, like I laughed, and I said, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And he was serious. And I told him, I said, "I've never played forward my whole life." And I kind of thought too, like the way I interpreted it too, I was like, what, are these guys now trying to embarrass me or something? Like
Yeah.
it just was strange. But so I mean, I was just happy to play. So I went out there, and actually the first shift I scored. And so I was like, right on, man. And like, screw you kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I ended up playing forward probably 10 games or so. And generally what would happen is I'd start the game on the wing, and by the third period, our D would be struggling, and I was good at D, so they'd put me back on D. So I usually play 2 forwards or 2 periods as a forward, and then get thrown back to try to seal the game or something on D.
Yeah. Was that like, I mean, I feel like it's tough being a pro at one position, being thrown in your first game as a forward at the NHL level, having only played D. Like, how, like, were you just like, fuck it, like, just go out there, have fun at this point? Like, I feel like the expectations couldn't, like, what were they expecting? Like, it couldn't have been, Ian, like, you know, like, you're training at practice completely different things. Like, your mentality, the way you see the game is different than a forward's. Like, I don't know. Like, I just feel like that's not a great situation to put somebody in. Like, if you were, like, I'm just thinking like a Mark Streit that played both ways, or a Matthew Dondino played both ways. Like, that's one thing, but I don't know. Like, I feel like, again, that's kind of like an insult to
Well, it's,
set
yeah, I
you up
mean,
to fail situation. And thank God you didn't, and you scored, and like you said, almost like a back at you moment here. But like, I feel like that's, again, kind of like a dick move on his part.
and yeah, and like I said, I don't know why he did that. Maybe he actually thought I'd be. I think his main issue with me was my size as a D-man. So maybe he actually thought I'd make a decent forward. I know after the season, so I played those 10 games up front, and then I went back to D the rest of the year. I had a really good year, and then after the season, um, the closest thing to an apology or an admission, I know he said in the papers that he was, because they were asking him why I sat, or he sat me out, and he said, he's like, that was a mistake on my part. I didn't know what he was capable of. So so personally, that gave me not that response, but that gave me a bad taste in my mouth. Obviously, right off the hop, this guy's benching me for the first 11 games of the year.
Yeah.
But I think he only lasted 2 years too. The guy, he wasn't very well liked.
Yeah, I
He
didn't
would,
get that impression that
yeah,
he was a fan favorite.
yeah, he would do things. It got to the point where guys just really didn't even enjoy going to the rink, and that's once you've gotten to that point, you've kind of lost it, and it's amazing when you think about it. Like hockey's the most fun sport, and being able to play professionally and going to the rink every day and hanging out with the guys, it's the best part of your day. And it got to the point where guys didn't even want to go to the rink because you just know you're going to be unhappy there. You're either going to get yelled at or something's going to happen. That's going to ruin your day. So yeah, the atmosphere was pretty low.
That's in like you said, I feel like I've never seen a sad person play hockey, and I feel like making the NHL is somebody's dream. And I don't want to speak for everybody, but most people that are playing competitive hockey aspire to play in the NHL. But the fact that he had such an influence where guys who are living their dream, playing hockey for a career, and lucky enough, to get paid for it at the highest level, aren't wanting to go to the rink, I feel like you got to mess up pretty bad as a coach to create that environment in the locker room, which is probably why I don't think he coached another National Hockey League team after leaving Toronto.
Yeah, I don't think he did.
Yeah, like he almost fell off the face of the earth. Like normally you'll hear like rumblings, names in a few circles, coaching vacancies after somebody gets, fired or whatever. And I feel like he almost like fell off the face of the earth. Like didn't hear anything from him afterwards or his name ever mentioned in like a coaching vacancy like interviews or anything.
I'm sure he could have coached again. It must have been a personal decision because you see so many coaches are recycled. Guys who you thought would be done are brought back, and it's it had to have been a personal choice not to coach again.
Yeah, no, after 2011, 2012, last year in Toronto, and that has not coached since. Crazy. Um, so after your second year under the Ron Wilson regime, uh, probably a change of the guard. Kind of, this is the one trade I think that kind of set off the dominoes of culture change in Toronto. Was you getting traded to, Calgary with Matt Stajan, Jamal Mayers, Nicholas Hagman for really the only significant piece that came back the other way was Dion Phaneuf, which ended up being their captain a couple of years later. You go from one Canadian market to another. And I mean, you weren't under Dale Sutter, but you had his brother Brent. What was it like? I mean, you talked about kind of the unhappy atmosphere that was going on in Toronto at the time. Like, was it a relief whenever you found out like you were getting kind of a fresh start and maybe out of that unhappy situation or toxic environment, whatever, in Toronto to go to hopefully a better situation in Calgary?
Yeah, I mean I didn't want to get traded. I loved playing in Toronto. I'd actually spoken to Brian Burke a week or two prior, and because there was lots of rumblings about guys getting traded and blowing the team up and stuff, and I just asked him outright if he was planning on trading me, and he said he wasn't going to trade me. And then a week or two later, I got the call. And I guess how the deal went down was he was dealing with Daryl Sutter, and they had the trade set up for Phaneuf, and Daryl said to him, he's like, I'm not doing it unless you throw Ian White in. So I got thrown in, and hey, getting a new start, it was fun. Getting traded probably is uh never fun, the actual trade part of it, because you're uprooting your whole life and moving somewhere brand new. Fortunately, there was a group of four of us who got traded together,
Mm-hmm.
and Matt Stajan being one of them. We were really good buddies. Jamal Mayers. There's a group of about four or five of us on the team that were super tight. So three of them, three of us were going together, which made it actually quite enjoyable. So
Yeah,
yeah,
just
we
traded a
went.
group of friends for Dion Phaneuf.
Yeah, well, and they had Nicholas Hagman too. He was actually a really good guy. He was thrown in that deal too. Um, yeah, so we got to Calgary, and being a Western Canadian, I love Calgary. Being in the Western Conference, we didn't even really see them that often, so you don't really know what you're getting into. But it was uh, it was definitely an experience. We didn't make playoffs that year, so we had an early end to the season. But yeah, it was nice to get a change of atmosphere and a fresh start.
So, I mean, we talked about the pedigrees of coaches and the effects that they have on the team. And I don't know about you, but when I think, if somebody were to say, name me a Calgary, like a coach that's synonymous with the Calgary Flames, in my head, I'm thinking Sutters. Um, and I feel like I'm probably not alone on that. Maybe people that are a few years older than me would, uh, oh God, his name's escaping me now. Great mustache on him. I forget his name though. He
Danny
went.
McDonald.
No,
Oh,
the coach.
oh,
He ended up
coach of
he ended up
Calgary.
going to Europe after. Um, I forget his name. I'll remember it tonight when I'm laying in bed. But anyways, I think Sutters. Daryl was in management. Brent was behind the bench. How was it like? We seen they just tried to revive, the Calgary team the last season and a half with Daryl, which obviously didn't end well. But how was it? I guess more in their heyday with two of them part of that organization. Like, what was that like?
You know what? I really like the Sutter brothers. Well, there's lots of them, but they were just I they're Western style people, ranch type folks, cowboy type people. It was both of them. Daryl was the first one that I obviously met, just him being the manager, and then uh, meeting Brent being the coach. It was they were good. I really liked them. Brent was a pretty hard driving coach, no nonsense type person. Um, he was, he demanded the most out of everyone, and provided a lot of energy too, just kind of quiet energy. He's a very intense person. In terms of Daryl, he was the manager, so didn't really get to see too much of his personality. I've seen way more of it when he was behind the bench in LA, and then some time in Calgary later. He seems like he'd be. I really liked him as a person, so he seemed like he would be a great coach to play for.
Um, and I mean, I've just pulled up this roster that you joined their squad. I mean, you had assistant coach. I mean, Noodles. He's friend of the show. He's been on before. Jamie McLennan. But joining you mentioned playing with Sundin, who most think of a great leader in Toronto, and then you end up going to play a few years later with, again, somebody that I feel synonymous as a Calgary Flame in Jerome McGinley. And the defense core that you joined on that team as well, Mark Giordano, Jay Boomister, Robin Regier, like there was some solid guys. And I mean, even their current GM, Craig Conroy, was, I believe that was the year he made a comeback and he joined them for a bunch of games. I mean, Corey Sarich, like there was this is a sweet team on paper.
Mhm.
This looks like a great team. And I mean, another guy that you were probably, I mean, he only played 6 games that season, but that you knew from Toronto would have been Vesa Toskala. I'm not sure when he played his 6 games, if it was beginning of the season or
No,
what, but
he got traded at the deadline too, but he got traded to San Jose, and then San Jose traded him to Calgary.
okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you had some familiar faces. You joined a great decor, and somebody that I would assume just from, I mean, listening to him speak, is a great leader in Jerome McGinley. Um, what would you say would have been like the leadership differences between a Matt Sundin and a Jerome McGinley?
Uh, yeah, it'll be tough to say because I was only in Calgary, from the deadline on. It's only like 2 months or so.
Yeah,
Um, but Matt's Matt's is Matt and Matt's is he is the best captain I've played for, bar none. Such a solid person, real stand-up guy, and the fact that he, was it 10 years that he was here, or was he 10 years a captain? But he was here so long, and having the status that he had, and the market in Toronto obviously is second to none for hockey. So when I would see him after every practice, after every game, he'd have, 50 to 100 media people that wanted a piece of him. And he was always generous with his time, would always answer questions, even if we were slumping or things weren't going well and, the whole city's feels like on his shoulders. He was always gracious, and he was just such an honorable person. Can't say enough good things about him. So he is my favorite captain. Then when I got to Calgary, um the situation was a little different. Again, he was a great guy too. He's got the pedigree, been there forever, and had so much success. You don't really have to say too much. You just go out there and play and get the guys on your back. So he's a good guy. Like to have fun and like to hang out. Him and Conroy, they were super tight, and I see the band's back together. So
it
it
seems to be. And it's kind of
yeah.
cool. Like, you guys were my generation of growing up, seeing, you guys come up, uh, and you guys is in that generation of hockey class. And now to see, it's almost like you said, the band's getting back together. It seems to be almost everywhere. I'm just waiting for, Toronto to announce, yourself, Matt's, I'm just trying to think, Brian McCabe and, you know, just
Tucker.
joining the front office in some capacity. It seems like almost everybody's kind of circling back, and everybody's what's old is new again, which I think is super cool. What, like, you know everybody, at least I think in Canada, would think there's nothing like a hockey market in Canada. Like, there's successful hockey markets in the States, but I feel like Canada lives and breathes hockey. What, like, playing in Toronto for so long, and then having the ability to go play in Calgary, where, like you said, as a Western Canadian, and playing your junior hockey out west, how different is it from, Toronto to Calgary, in terms of, like, I don't want to say passion, but, like, is it, do we feel it as much as we see in the big hockey markets out east, like Toronto and Montreal, as there is in, like, Calgary or Edmonton? Like, is it just as intense out there as
Yeah.
it seems to be in the East?
Well, Calgary, um, quite frankly, I got recognized there more than I would in Toronto. And people, like the day that we got traded there, so the four of us jumped on a plane and flew there, and we went out to eat. And on the way to eat, like I stopped at Shoppers Drug Mart, and people, and I at that time I wasn't like, a very recognizable face in the NHL, let alone the fact that people would really have to be following hockey to know that we got traded there. But people were coming up at Shoppers Drug Mart. We went out for dinner. Tables of people were coming up asking for our autographs and stuff. To the point where that was day one. To the point where you couldn't go out anywhere without people coming up to you. In Toronto, you get that, to some degree, but it was nothing like it was in Calgary.
That's actually really cool, and that's, you know, I don't know if people would expect that, or like, people listening, or people that aren't or didn't have the ability to play in those markets. But I think that's really cool. I would not have guessed that that you would just think, because it seems like the microscope is so, or the magnifying glass is so intense on Toronto that you wouldn't have a chance to come up for air anywhere you went. Um,
Yeah, I was surprised too. I think maybe the only difference is that Toronto is just such a big place. Um, Maybe just people don't recognize you as much, you know what I mean? But
and I mean, two very recognizable arenas as well: ACC, or was ACC, and the Saddle Dome. How cool is it to say that you were able to play in? I mean, the Saddle Dome's on its last leg, but to say that you played in probably two of the most recognizable arenas in the league.
yeah, I'm not so sure why they're wanting a new rink or what the deal with that is in Calgary. That Saddle Dome I thought was a fantastic arena. Um, I
I
really
know
like
from
playing.
what I read, I think the roof, and they've had flooding like the last couple of years in the arena, like off season flooding.
Okay,
Um, and it's just whatever it's going to cost to repair isn't worth the money of whatever their cost analysis is. It's not worth it. They're better off building another
okay,
arena. But it's just, again, I think Calgary Flames, Saddle Dome.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's right where the Stampede is. It's such a neat design, and the right place to have that type of rink. It was so cool. It'll be too bad when they get rid of it. It's always a little sad when these old rinks get
Yeah.
put to rest, like the Joe down in Detroit. Just so much history there, and yeah, it's sad when you see them go.
Yeah. I mean, I was fortunate enough to go to Joe Louis Arena a couple times before it closed down, but just to know, like, I would have loved, as like, I'm a diehard Habs fan at heart, to be able to go into the Montreal Forum. Obviously, they're not going to play there forever, but to even just, you know, if they're able to preserve something, or turn it into something else, whether it's a museum or keep it as more of like instead of just like an ice facility, have it for, uh, you know, concerts or festivals or something that doesn't require as much maintenance. Um,
Mhm.
like, it would be cool for them to repurpose it somehow, and kind of keep that history, because I feel like it's a landmark as well. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like, with, like you said, the unique shape and in the look, and with the Stampede being right there, like the Saddle Dome fits that theme. Um, it just, I don't know, like it's
Well,
gonna be a shame whenever it comes to that day where it's the last game and the curtains, get pulled on it.
yeah, these like I played the last game in the Winnipeg Arena before they tore it down too, and 30, 20, 30 years after, you've got new generations of people who have never been to those rinks, and they mean nothing to them. Space is far more important. Someone's got to pay to keep that thing up and running. So I could see why they tear them down, because life goes by so fast that you've got the next generations where these things mean nothing to them, right? So
It's a shame. I hope that they take some piece of memorabilia from the Saddle Dome and bring it to like the Hockey Hall of Fame or some museum maybe in Calgary or something to commemorate. I actually have a seat from the Montreal Forum in my little at home studio here, and it's probably my favorite piece of memorabilia I have, just because of the history of the franchise and the amount of cups won in that building. But um, I guess not everything can be saved or held on to, no matter how good it is. So leaving Carolina, or sorry, leaving Calgary, you headed to Carolina. You're reunited with your former head coach in Toronto and coach in the AHL, Paul Maurice. Was it any different playing for Paul Maurice the second time around than it was the first?
um maybe a little bit, yeah. Like the team in Colorado, or sorry, Carolina was quite a bit younger, and now he's been coaching for quite a while, and Carolina, the market obviously has a lot less people, even though they're the hockey fans there. The hockey is huge in Raleigh and the surrounding area, but you don't have the same pressure as obviously if you're playing in Toronto. So yeah, it was neat to get reunited with him. I'm probably one of the reasons, or he's probably one of the reasons, or the main reason why I got traded there. So is I always liked playing for him, and he liked to have me. So it was great to be reunited.
Well, and especially it's interesting, especially like you mentioned that second trade. You got traded with a Sutter by the
Yeah,
Sutters. um, like like you said, trades are tough because you're uprooting. I mean, I'm sure you had some kind of conversation with Brett, but how awkward is it when your own family is the one trading you and uprooting you?
yeah, and I believe that was Daryl's son too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I want to say it was Daryl's. Like it was definitely one of their sons. Yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't say here.
well, it might have been Brent's, I guess. His name is Brett.
Brett. Yeah. Um, yeah, it does not say. I will look if you want to continue talking. I will look up who their family tree. It's probably gonna be like 20 pages long, but
Yeah, no, that was I could see that being a very interesting dynamic to have your son playing for you, or even playing in the same league, do you trade for him? Do you want him on your team?
it is Daryl's son.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
dad says, "Sorry, you're not good enough. We're moving on," or for whatever reason, son, we're taking a different direction. That is gonna make for an awkward Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner.
Well, you got to wonder what the conversation is even like at home, It's like, does he sit him down and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about trading you," or does he just, come home from the rink one day, say, "Hey, I dealt you," or does he actually do the trade first and then call him into the office? And yeah, that'd be
Does
a,
he
a,
make
a
mom
strange
break the
dynamic.
news? Or maybe Uncle Brent had to tell him. That's just yeah. I can't imagine like it's those are tough calls to make. And I mean, I've worked in front offices in baseball and had to make a couple of those calls, and it's tough. And I don't even know some of the guys. Some of them are prospects, and I'm like, hey, and it's so you want to just stick to a script or stick to the uh just the need to know information to let them process this. I couldn't imagine like that. If your dad's calling you, the last thing on your mind is, you know, hey son, I just traded you.
Yeah.
That's interesting for sure. But I mean, you know, I feel like everywhere you landed had either a cool coach or some great guys that did something later on or before with their careers, like, mentioning Matt's and Jerome, and then you join Carolina with Paul again. And then, I mean, fresh off a cup, I guess, 4 years later. But, you have one of my favorite goaltenders to watch of all time, Cam Ward, Eric Stahl. You're there for a year. I mean, and then you have somebody like Ron Francis as assistant coach. Like, I just feel like everywhere you went, there's such cool history that, you were a part of in some aspect or another, or your hockey career intertwined with, some pretty great people. It's so cool and interesting to watch and to look back at these rosters and just be like, that's sweet. I played with them. I was part of that. I had success with these guys.
Yeah, no doubt.
Is there anybody that you've ever played with that you, I guess, I don't want to say starstruck, probably isn't the word, once you've played, at such a high level for years, but was there anybody that you're like, you were excited to play with, or, cool to be a part of a team with this person?
Yeah, well, so when I signed in Detroit, when I got to camp, I had no idea who I'd be playing with, and I get to the rink, and Babcock had me paired up with Lidstrom, and I guess you're in a little bit of shock, because I'm like, you look over, I'm like, oh, so it's like I'm just meeting him for the first time too, and all of a sudden I'm paired up with him. So not only teammates of possibly the best D-man ever, uh, getting a chance to be his D partner, it was very surreal.
Well, for sure. And one of the questions I like asking the former players we had on was to make your, if you're a D man, I'm like, name your ideal D partner. It can be somebody you played with, can be somebody you wish you played with, or, somebody you looked up to when you were a kid and modeled your game after, and the goalie you would want to play in front of. And the answer, I would say, from, if we had 10 D men on, I don't know our exact number, 9 of them said Nick Lidstrom. So the fact that you actually played with Nick Lidstrom, very cool. Because, I mean, a lot of people only dreamed of wanting to play with somebody like Nick Lidstrom. I'm sure if I asked Nick Lidstrom, his answer would have been Ian White. Like it's like you said, like, just so cool. And again, you're talking about being under somebody like Mike Babcock, who, I mean, for a while up until his kind of departure in Toronto, had a pretty, pretty great resume, and well, I mean, still has a good resume, but pretty great reputation of being, a legendary coach. And I'm sure he will make the Hall of Fame whenever he decides that he's done coaching. And I met Babcock for a brief time when I was working in pro baseball. He was in town in Ottawa for some World Cup of hockey stuff for Team Canada that he was coaching, and was a man of few words in the 4 hours that I spent with him. I got to sit down with Joel Kenville and Barry Trotz and Bill Peters, and Babs had very little to say, but when he did speak, it was almost like everybody turned and listened. How intense was he as a coach? Because I was definitely intimidated by him, and he had no authority over me. He just seems like another one of those, kind of strikes me as like a Pat Quinn, where kind of like a no nonsense look to him.
Yeah, it'd probably be depending on the scenario. So fortunately, Detroit, we had a bunch of, four cup guys. We have some Hall of Fame style guys. And so we had a lot of legends of the game on our team. So when you've got guys, we probably had 3 or 4 guys who had won 4 Stanley Cups. So the whoever is coaching that those guys command so much respect, right? So it'd be very different than if you're coaching like when he took over Toronto and it was mainly young guys and
Mm-hmm.
you know, so the dynamic, the coaching dynamic would be different just because we had so many older guys and guys that you're not gonna, really tell what to do or boss around. And um, but he was a very, very intense guy. Man, a few words, yeah, that's for sure.
And just again, looking through, the guys you played with over your 2 years in Detroit, like you mentioned, uh, especially year one before a couple guys retired, Holmstrom, Lidstrom, Zetterberg, Datsuk, Filppula, my boy, the back of this t-shirt is Johan Franz and the Mule. Like you said, that pedigree of guys that won several cups is again, playing in the Joe, just a whole atmosphere on its own. And like, I don't know how, how you went from team to team like you did and kept your cool, because I don't know if I would have been able to compose myself to not fangirl, around some of these guys. But so cool that your career took you on the path it did, because I feel like not everybody gets to experience so much you have, and which is a reason why we wanted you, or that I reached out to you to come on, was just because of how everywhere you went, I feel like there's a story, and you got to do something cool and play with such a great cast, which, if you're being brought into these situations, speaks volumes of yourself. And, even though, like you said, you're playing with somebody where, like Nick Lidstrom, where arguably one of the best defensemen to ever play the game, the fact that a coach, a Hall of Fame coach, a multi-Stanley Cup winning coach, pairs you with that guy on that top line or top pairing, again, speaks volumes to your game. And even though, you're looking at it, Ian White, Nick Lidstrom, there is credit to Ian White for what you've done and the longevity you've played and the people you played with and the organizations you played with. And we went through the list of coaches you played for. None of those guys, I would say, are easy guys to please, and at least seem from, the people that I've had on that have had interactions with some of these guys, demand a lot from their players and have high standard. So, I just want, to I don't want to say commemorate, but congratulate you and say, like, you were able to do something that I don't think many NHL defensemen were able to do. In that is please probably some of the most difficult coaches, that the game might ever see, in terms of demanding. And it's just, you've had a fantastic career in terms of what you were able to do, who you were able to please, and who you had the opportunity to play with. It's very, you've had a special career.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
No problem. And I feel like I'm very long-winded tonight. Like, I'm just going around in circles, and I'm not sure if it's because one of our spotlights burnt it out, and it's just very warm and just glaring in my eyes the entire time. And I'm maybe the sunlight's getting to me here, but just again, like you said, you're surprised to be recognized in Calgary, but not everybody is recognized. And like I said, you wouldn't be being offered contracts by these teams that have these pedigree guys, and you wouldn't be matched up with these guys if you weren't one of these guys. And we didn't even speak about San Jose, but you played with another fantastic team in San Jose in the peak of what felt like 6 or 7 years of San Jose going deep, 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 deep,
Yeah.
deep every year. And, another coach that, I know through a family member who is actually good friends with Todd McLennan, and now is head coach of the Edmonton Oilers, and Jay Woodcroft being an assistant there. You played with Patty Marleau, Joe Thornton, Pavelski, 1507 Danny Heater, like just Dan Boyle. Like, you played with so many great guys and on such great teams that it's like I almost want you to brag about yourself a bit.
Well, that's San Jose. That was a fun run too. We went to the conference finals that year. We were probably, I think we were better than Vancouver. We lost to Vancouver the year that they lost to Boston in 7 in the finals. But we had a tough first round. We played LA we won in 6 games. Very physical, very tough series. Then we were playing Detroit in the second round, and we won the first 3 games. And so the atmosphere was incredible. We're like, man, we're gonna march we're just gonna walk right to the finals. We're not even gonna have any opposition. And then Detroit won the next 3 games. So now the mood and the pressure was incredible because they had such a history of blowing it in playoffs, and now we might blow it the worst yet because we were up 3-0 against Detroit. So we had game 7 at home, and fortunately we pulled it out and we won 2-1, I believe. And then we flew right away to Vancouver. They finished 1 in the conference, we finished 2, so they had home ice, and I think we won the first game. I know we won one. We split the first 2 games anyway, so we're coming home tied. We won game 3, so we're still sitting good. And then game 4, there was a stretch. I think it was towards the end of the first period where the ref called like 4 penalties in a row on us within a couple minutes. So we were shorthanded 5-on-3 for like 4 or 5 minutes. It was something ridiculous. And they scored 2 goals, and we couldn't get our feet under us after that. So they tied up 2-2, and we just or sorry. What was it? We split it was 1-1 coming home. We lost in 5, I thought.
I will pull up the exact scores. Vancouver, San Jose, 2011. Not flights.
Because I'm pretty sure. Well, I know we lost the game was in Vancouver, so it must have been game 5. So I guess we only won 1 game, and we got knocked out 4-1. But game 5,
yes, it was 4-1 Vancouver. So game 1, 3-2 Canucks. Game 2, 7-3 Canucks. Game 3, you guys won 4-3. Game 4 was 4-2 Vancouver. And then game 5 was the double OT 3-2 Vancouver win.
So that's what it was. It's amazing how your memory fails. But so that was game 4 then. Yeah. So we won game 3. And then game 4, that's what happened. Game 4, we got screwed on a bunch of calls and then lost that game. Game 5 actually I saw something came up on my Instagram the other day, which was funny because I was on the ice for that double OT goal, and we're in our end. The puck goes to Bieksa at the point, and he goes to shoot it around the net or like dump it into the corner. And so everyone on the ice, we're looking for the puck like around the boards because he shot it on the glass. So I'm skating behind the net with one of their guys, and our goalie's looking behind the net. We're all like, even their team too, we're all skating like kind of behind the net. And what had happened was it hit a stanchion and bounced right back to him. So he was the only guy on the ice that knew where the puck was. And I'm behind the net. When I look and I see where the puck is, and our goalie's like looking back there too, and he might have gone out to try to stop it. I don't know, but he wasn't in position and he wasn't looking. And so Bieksa got the puck at the point with basically a wide open net and shoots it into the net. Sure enough, the confetti's coming down, and that's the end of our season. It was quite a crappy way to end our run because we were
No
such
kidding.
a good team.
Well, yeah, and like I said, it seems like every year was like San Jose's got to win the cup this year. San Jose, like they're gonna go. They're gonna close the deal, and they to this day still have not closed the deal.
Yeah, it's too
But
bad 'cause they got great fan support there too.
you know what? They just brought back Patty Marleau. Maybe they're going to bring in I mean, I don't even think Joe Thornton's officially announced the retirement. He's probably still hoping to play somewhere.
Yeah, probably.
But it's just, you know, I don't know. I can see San Jose turning it around quickly. I just a gut feeling about them. I really appreciate you coming on, Ian. I had a great time, and I mean, even more of an Ian White fan now than I was before. One thing that my co-host wanted me to tell you is his favorite NHL mustache is Ian White's mustache.
Oh, right
And I
on.
tend to agree that Caterpillar you had for a few years is definitely legendary. It is up there with Lanny McDonald.
Cool. I appreciate that. Well, tell him I say thanks.
I'll let him know, and if you can talk your wife into growing one back, I think you'll get that call sooner rather than later to go back and get into some player development. We need those stashes back.
All right, buddy.
All
Take
right, you
care,
take
man.
care. Nice chatting with you.
Okay, see ya.